The Piglet Who Would Be King. So in this episode, Pooh gives Piglet some random junk he found as a present, and Tigger and Rabbit convince Piglet that he needs to make a grand gesture of friendship back to Pooh in return, in this case a huge quantity of honey. This leads them to travel to the jungle, I guess, the 100-acre jungle, in search of the land of milk and honey, which turns out to be inhabited by pygmy piglets. Is pygmy offensive? Anyway, the junk Pooh gave Piglet is actually a magical MacGuffin that brings infinite honey, so they appoint Piglet their new king, and Tigger and Rabbit appoint themselves Prime Minister and Chamberlain to do the actual job of ruling. But of course they're pretty bad at it. Piglet tells them they're being jerks, and they feel bad and decide to go home. But they take Piglet's magical MacGuffin present when they leave, bringing the doom of Valyria on this society as the nearby honey volcano erupts. Or it would be doom, except Piglet finally decides to do some real kinging for once, and rallies the pygmies to come together to save themselves, in an ironic display of anti-authoritarianism. And then they go home and presumably never think about this jungle piglet civilization ever again. I mostly remember this episode for its visuals. The scenes in the jungle and the pygmy city have a pretty unique look. There's a pretty cool musical bit where they slide around on jungle tree trunks and bounce off big vile-plume flower petals and stuff. You know, it's neat. So what's up with this land of milk and honey? And the whole jungle, for that matter. I mean, there can't be a jungle in the English countryside where the 100-acre woods is, so I guess this is imagination at work again. Either Tigger, Rabbit, and Piglet are imagining this jungle because they believe the land of milk and honey is located in one, or Christopher Robin imagines that this jungle and the land of milk and honey exist somewhere within the 100-acre wood. The pygmies seem about as real as our heroes, though, so in this case, I'm gonna say I subscribe to the Christopher Robin theory. I think the conflict in this episode could have used some higher stakes, honestly. Like, they're going for a thing where Tigger and Rabbit are abusing their power over the pygmies. Rabbit makes them start farming carrots. Tigger gets a bunch of them and teaches them to bounce. They both have them make giant stone statues in their honor. The problem is that none of it really seems to be at the cost of anything. Like, the pygmies seem fine with or without their new king and his two morally dubious but totally harmless deputies. They don't seem to mind building the statues or anything. They're down for whatever, man. The only real problem that our protagonists cause is when they take Piglet's present back and trigger the volcano, which isn't related at all to their power over the pygmies. In fact, it only happens when they decide to abdicate their positions and leave the pygmies to their own devices. So this act of pulling the statues down to stop the honey flood is, thematically muddled. They're tearing down the symbols of bad authority, I guess, but only because their king told them to, and these figures were ready to abdicate anyway. Maybe it's meant to symbolize that they're making a clean break with their authority, like the symbols of Tigger and Rabbit's regime are fully erased as they transition back to their anarcho-communist, godless, savage ways. They won't have infinite magical honey anymore, which is a bummer, but, you know, I'm sure they'll manage. Also, there's a subplot about Pooh breaking into all of their houses while they're away, rummaging through their honey cabinets, finding no honey, and concluding there's a honey napper on the loose. It's unremarkable. So, I guess I still like this one, but not as much as I expected to. Whatever lesson it's meant to teach is pretty flimsy, but it's definitely a unique episode, if only for its memorable setting and visuals. Episode 6. Cleanliness is next to impossible. Here's an episode I don't remember ever seeing before, and it's the most Christopher Robin-focused episode yet. Christopher Robin's mom wants him to clean his room, but he doesn't want to. Tigger sings an obnoxious song about throwing all his stuff under the bed, so that's what he does. But whoa, Nelly! Turns out there's an evil Alice in Wonderland-esque world under the bed where all his lost stuff has been enslaved by a monster named Crud. They take Pooh, Piglet, Tigger, and Christopher Robin prisoner, and they have to stage a prison break, and then lead a people's revolt to overthrow Crud with the power of cleanliness. Christopher Robin smites him with bath soap and vows to never let his room get dirty again. I don't like it. It's better than Pooh Ought to Be in Pictures because it's got a fantastical setting, so it doesn't gross me out in the same way as Pooh and company running around causing mischief in a real-world movie theater. But it's a Christopher Robin episode, so it's speaking directly to little kids, and the lesson is clean your room. Great. But why clean your room, though? Because you don't want to get transported to a magical Deltarune world and defeat a giant slime monster? I mean, what kid wouldn't want to do that? I don't know. I just think if I were a kid, this would have the complete opposite of the intended effect on me. But I'm not a kid, so instead, I'm just bored. Episode 7, The Great Honeypot Robbery. This episode starts with everyone's honey being stolen by some mysterious figures. Everyone assumes Pooh's been stealing the honey, but Roo tells them it was something else that's been hiding under their beds, and everyone just remembers, oh, yeah, he's right. So I've been wondering about the economics of the 100-acre wood. On face value, you would think honey was just something Pooh liked. The lasagna to his Garfield, if you will. But more sensible, because he's a bear. Like, rabbits don't eat honey. Kangaroos probably don't eat honey. You know, it's a bear thing. But it seems like actually, honey is just something everyone's into. Like how everyone's into foot baths and ointments in the Bible. Pooh's just fat and has the least impulse control about it. So where does that honey come from? I don't think they have money in the 100-acre wood. Even if they did have money, they certainly don't have jobs, except maybe Rabbit. Maybe that's why Pooh always wants to borrow honey from Rabbit, because he's got his gardening gig and he can afford honey, and Pooh's got to bum it? But I mean, even if money were a thing in the 100-acre wood, who would Rabbit buy it from? Christopher Robin? Does Christopher Robin like honey? You know, I'm going to keep an eye on that boy from now on and see if he ever partakes in the future. But anyway, no, they definitely don't buy their honey. They must gather it themselves. And you would think Pooh would be the best at gathering honey because he's a bear. But we saw in Friend Indeed and Piglet Who Would Be King, not to mention the old theatrical shorts, that gathering honey is an extremely difficult and risky enterprise for everyone, including Pooh. The honey nappers in this episode certainly don't want to do it, which is why they're stealing in the first place. I don't know, I guess I'm just sitting here like, where's all this honey coming from? Anyway, the gang sets up an elaborate trap to catch these honey nappers, who turn out to be Hef and Stan, a Heffalump and a Woozle. They just beat the toys up and throw them into a tree, and they're about to make off with the honey despite being caught, but Hef is afraid of mice, and he thinks Roo is a giant mouse, so they flee. But they come back later with Wooster, a colossal Woozle titan, presumably as old as the world itself. Man, what is a Woozle? Heffalumps I think I get. They're these stuffed elephant toy things. Woozles, though, I mean, we see some in Piglet's Nightmare in There's No Camp Like Home, and they look like stuffed toys. One of them sort of looks like a weasel, wearing a boater hat. Another one kind of looks like a kangaroo. But Stan doesn't look like a stuffed toy. I think he's just an actual weasel, like the animal. Maybe the residents of the 100-acre wood don't distinguish between real animals and stuffed ones. Like, a bear is a bear, whether it's stuffed or biological, and that's that. But then, Wooster's just his own thing. Maybe Woozle's just a catch-all term for scary, unknown things. Maybe Heffalumps are technically a subset of Woozles. I guess that'd explain it, kind of. Or maybe Wooster's just a freak outlier Woozle. Or maybe he's the Woozle, the primal Woozle, of which all lesser Woozles are mere poor facsimiles. Okay, I'm bored with this line of inquiry. Anyway, they come back with Wooster, and all the toys try to throw them off the trail in various ways. Tigger thinks he can fight them until he sees how big Wooster is. Rabbit makes a sign telling them to go the wrong way, but Wooster can't read, so it does nothing. But Pooh thinks they should just make friends with the thieves instead, and offers to share his honey with them. Hef and Stan don't go for it, but Wooster, apparently deeply emotionally unfulfilled by his strictly business relationships with them, is swayed. Happy ending, everyone's friends. Except Stan and Hef, who were presumably reabsorbed into the primordial proto-Woozle agglomerate that is Wooster. This ending makes me think about honey economics, yes, again. It's all nice and good to say, hey, we should all be friends and share. But the idea that asking nicely will get them honey better than stealing will, well, it could, but only if the person you're asking is willing and able. I mean, Pooh comes ready to share here, but he runs out of honey all the time. If he were hungry and down to his last pot, would he give it to Wooster just because he asked for it? What if Wooster were convinced to try asking nicely, but when he did, the answer was no? Would we still get this happy ending, or would Wooster revert to a force of nature, tearing the 100-acre wood asunder in his uncontrollable rage, obliterating all life and leaving nothing in his wake but a charred, barren hellscape? I guess we'll just have to wonder. Episode 8A, Stripes. Stripes. A seminal Tigger episode, and one that goes right for the heartstrings. Tigger's a dirty, unwashed hooligan, so the other animals forcibly bathe him. This somehow washes his stripes off, and the others conclude that since Tiggers have stripes, this thing isn't Tigger. So not Tigger tries being a rabbit, and then a bear, and then a tree, because he's too big to be a piglet, you see, fails at them all, has an identity crisis, and sings a sad song, until Eeyore tells him he's still Tigger on the inside. So he starts acting like a Tigger and bouncing again, and this makes his stripes reappear. The stripes were inside him all along. It's a metaphor, I guess. So on this rewatch, I found it a little annoying how Pooh, Rabbit, and Piglet all immediately and independently conclude this isn't Tigger. They don't even consider the possibility that maybe the stripes washed off. Like, I know that's crazy, but I mean, is it any crazier than thinking that some new being just appeared in the tub while you were giving Tigger a bath and he vanished? I don't know. I know the animals, aside from Eeyore, are all pretty stupid, but this is extreme even for them, to the point where it actually feels a little contrived. I guess this episode kind of addresses my questions about honey economics from Great Honeypot Robbery, as we see Pooh out gathering honey, and the dialogue implies that this is just kind of what he does during the day. So I guess the answer to where honey comes from is Pooh gathers it. Maybe it's not always as treacherous to do as it was in the earlier episodes we saw. But then why does he need to borrow it from Rabbit if Pooh is the source? Maybe Pooh spends all his time gathering honey because he's actually really bad at it, and Rabbit does gather his own honey. He's just way more efficient and can spend more time in his garden while Pooh has to spend all his time gathering honey. I don't know, sounds wrong, but oh well. So even though I think the setup is weak, by the time they're painting fake stripes on Tigger only to have them washed off in the rain and the sad music kicks in, I'm on board. Tigger's identity crisis, while it's extremely hammy, it's pretty sad nevertheless. Though, I don't know why it's suddenly a clear night now when it was explicitly raining just moments ago. But Tigger's song is almost more like a spoken word poem than a full-on song, and it's pretty effective. He had a similar kind of half-song in Cleanliness is Next to Impossible, which I found annoying, but this one I don't mind. I'm not sure why exactly. Maybe it's something to do with that song was a silly attempt to convince Christopher Robin to do something stupid, while this one is just a little bit of sad introspection. Eeyore's speech about how it's what's on the inside that counts is, it's exactly what you expect. It's all well and good. Okay, but time for a gripe. Tigger was acting like himself when he first got out of the tub. He didn't start acting like something else until the others convinced him he wasn't Tigger. He was even bouncing for a second there, so why didn't his stripes start to reappear then? Gotcha, Disney. Plot hole exposed. So that's Stripes. Kinda contrived and cheesy, but I still felt sorry for Tigger when I was supposed to, so I guess it worked anyway. Episode 8B, Monkey See, Monkey Do Better. So the toys hear that it's Christopher Robin's birthday and hear him talking about, quote, the best present a kid could get, which turns out to be a wind-up monkey named Bruno. Bruno's a big jerk and tells Pooh, Rabbit, Tigger, and Piglet that they are obsolete and challenges them to try to outdo him at anything. If they can, he'll leave. If they can't, they gotta go. They never actually agree to these terms, by the way, but whatever. So Bruno outbounces Tigger, sort of, outgardens Rabbit, somehow, and out-honeys Pooh. So I guess this is confirmation Pooh does in fact gather the honey himself. Rabbit even says Pooh's good at it. So I ask again, where does Rabbit get his honey? Where's the honey come from, Rabbit? Why does a wind-up dancing monkey shoot super science giant carrot seeds out of his fingers? So Bruno wins this non-bet, and the gang pack up to leave, but twist, Christopher Robin finds them at the last minute and tells them it's not actually his birthday, it's his friend's birthday, and he's giving him Bruno. But Bruno thinks he's being thrown away, and goes into the forest to die alone. Yep, he just pulls out his wind-up key and powers down for what he presumably believes will be the last time. I mean, Bruno is a self-absorbed meanie pants, so I guess you could read this as a power play for sympathy, like he's gonna run away and semi-die so the others will have no choice but to come after him. I don't think so, though. To me, he reads as being pretty genuine about just wanting to power off for good here. But the gang find him, wind him back up, tell him he's being given to another kid. He's pumped for that, so they put him back in the box. The end. Okay, so long. See you in
bother.
Bruno. It's alright. It's kind of hard to feel much for Bruno after he's been nothing but a jerk. I guess his inflated ego means that rejection probably hurts extra hard for him. I get that, and I do feel bad for him in this scene. But I mean, Bruno's no Tigger. He's not even a Kessie. Not even close. I can only care so much. Also, something's a little off to me about the premise of this one. Something about, like, the way that they're talking about themselves like toys, and like they're Christopher Robin's toys afraid of being replaced. I know historically that's what they are, but Winnie the Pooh's not Toy Story. They're, I don't know, they're his friends. Like, they're themselves. They're people, characters first, and toys second, I guess? I don't know. I don't like that it's acknowledged. Alright, that's gonna do it for this one. Hey, look at that. Got through 5 whole episodes. This one. That's better than last time. Got one done. Probably gonna pick up the pace. I imagine that as more goes on and I have fewer and fewer new observations that probably each one will take less time each. I think. That's what I expect to happen. But I guess we'll see. Well, I guess maybe I did 4. The last one, the Tigger one and the monkey one those were 2 half episodes, only 11 minutes each, so I guess you could say those were one. So we got 4 or 5. That's fine. That's good. Happy with that. Great. Got it. Okay. Thanks to everyone whose name is scrolling by, all of whom are pledging $5 or more on Patreon. Thanks especially to Matthew, David, Ash, Bob, Chelsea, and Crack. You guys are the best. Check out my Patreon, patreon.com/BenSaint, if you want your name on this list. And follow me on Twitter. Follow me on Twitch. Follow me on saintcomics.com. It's my website. You can't follow that. It's just a website, but you check it out. Got my stuff. Look at my stuff. I've made stuff. All right. The end.